The Lighthouse Keeper's Last Summer. Chapter 1. The Letter. I've always believed that life's greatest adventures come when you least expect them. At 76 years old, I thought my adventuring days were behind me. Then a letter arrived that changed everything. My name is Eleanor Fitzpatrick, and I live in a small cottage in Devon, overlooking the sea. My husband, Thomas, passed away 5 years ago, and since then, my days have followed a comfortable pattern. Morning walks along the cliff path. Afternoons in my garden. Evenings with a good book and a cup of tea. It was a peaceful life, perhaps a bit too peaceful. The letter came on a Tuesday in late May. The envelope was thick, official-looking, with a return address from a solicitor's office in Edinburgh. My first thought was that some distant relative had died and left me a haunted castle. My second thought was that I'd been reading too many Gothic novels. Dear Mrs. Fitzpatrick, we are writing regarding the estate of your late uncle, Captain James Morrison. As his sole surviving relative, you have been named as the beneficiary of his property, Dunmore Lighthouse on the Isle of Skye, Scotland. The lighthouse has been decommissioned and is now a private residence. Captain Morrison lived there until his death last month at the age of 98. He has left the property to you, along with a request that you spend one summer there before deciding whether to keep or sell it. We await your response. Sincerely, Malcolm Fraser, solicitor. I read the letter 3 times, my tea growing cold beside me. Uncle James. I had vague childhood memories of a tall, weathered man, who smelled of pipe tobacco and salt water, who told fantastical stories about storms and shipwrecks and mysterious lights on the horizon. He'd been my father's older brother, and they'd had some sort of falling out when I was young. I hadn't seen Uncle James since I was perhaps 8 or 9 years old. And now he'd left me a lighthouse. I picked up the phone and called my daughter, Caroline, who lived in London. "Mum, that's extraordinary," she said. "Are you going to go?" "Go? To Scotland? For an entire summer? Don't be ridiculous." "Why not? What's keeping you in Devon?" I opened my mouth to list all the reasons. My garden, my routines, my book club, my age. And realized none of them were actually reasons at all. They were excuses. What if I fall and break my hip in the middle of nowhere? I said finally. "Mum, you hike 5 miles a day. Your hip is fine. Look, I think you should go. When's the last time you did something unexpected?" "I bought red shoes last year." "That doesn't count. This is a lighthouse on a Scottish island. It's romantic. It's adventurous. It's probably damp and covered in seagull droppings." But even as I said it, I felt a flutter of excitement in my chest. A lighthouse. An island. A whole summer somewhere completely new. "I'll think about it," I told Caroline. "Don't think too long," she said. Summer doesn't last forever. Chapter 2. Arrival. 6 weeks later, I found myself on a ferry crossing to Skye. My car packed with enough supplies to survive a siege. Caroline had insisted on driving me up to Scotland, making sure I was properly settled before returning to London. We'd made a holiday of it, stopping at various spots along the way. But now, as the misty outline of Skye appeared through the rain, I felt my courage wavering. "It's not too late to turn back," I said. Caroline laughed. "Mum, we've driven 600 miles. We're not turning back." Dunmore Lighthouse sat on a rocky promontory on the island's northern coast. accessed by a narrow single-track road that made my heart hammer in my chest. It was a classic white tower with a red top, attached to a two-story keeper's cottage that looked like it had grown out of the rocks themselves. "It's absolutely perfect," Caroline breathed as we pulled up. She was right. Despite my misgivings, there was something magical about it. The lighthouse stood proud against the gray sky, surrounded by wild coastal grasses and purple heather. Seabirds wheeled overhead, their cries mixing with the sound of waves crashing against the rocks below. Malcolm Fraser, the solicitor, was waiting for us with the keys. He was a cheerful man in his 50s, with a thick Scottish accent that took me a few minutes to fully understand. Captain Morrison was a grand character, he said as he showed us through the cottage. Lived here 40 years after he retired from the Navy. Kept the place immaculate, he did. The cottage was indeed beautifully maintained. Downstairs was a cozy sitting room with a wood-burning stove, a compact kitchen, and a bathroom that had been recently modernized. Upstairs were 2 bedrooms with views that made you feel like you were floating above the sea. The lighthouse itself is locked, Malcolm explained, handing me a large brass key. But you're welcome to go up anytime. The light doesn't work anymore. Been decommissioned 20 years. But the view is spectacular. Now, there's a few things the captain wanted you to know. He pulled out a letter, this one in shaky handwriting. Dear Eleanor, if you're reading this, you came. Good. I know we haven't spoken in decades, and that's partly my fault. Your father and I were both too stubborn for our own good. I've left you this place because I think you'll understand it. You always loved the sea, even as a little girl. I remember you collecting shells and asking me questions about the tides. There's something I want you to do while you're here. In the lighthouse, in my desk drawer, you'll find a journal. It belonged to the first lighthouse keeper, Angus MacDonald, who served here from 1879 to 1923. He was an amateur naturalist and artist, and his observations of the local wildlife and weather patterns are extraordinary. I believe this journal belongs in a museum or archive, where it can be properly preserved and studied. But I never knew which one. I'd like you to solve this puzzle for me. Find the right home for Angus MacDonald's journal. Consider it your summer project. With affection. Your Uncle James. A treasure hunt, Caroline said delightedly. Mum, this is brilliant. I had to admit, my curiosity was piqued. After Malcolm left and Caroline helped me unpack, I found myself drawn to the lighthouse door. The brass key turned smoothly in the lock, and I climbed the spiral stairs, my hand running along the cool metal railing. At the top, in a small circular room that had once housed the light mechanism, stood an old roll-top desk. And in the drawer, exactly as Uncle James had promised, was a leather-bound journal. Its pages yellowed with age but still intact. I opened it carefully. The first page read, Journal of Observations by Angus MacDonald, Keeper of Dunmore Light, January 1879. What followed was beautiful. Detailed drawings of seabirds, notes on weather patterns, observations of seals and whales, pressed flowers, and philosophical musings about life, solitude, and the sea. It was a masterpiece. Oh, Uncle James, I whispered. You've given me quite a task. Chapter 3. The Island Community. My first week on Skye was spent settling in and beginning my research. The cottage had surprisingly good internet. Uncle James had clearly kept up with technology. And I started making a list of museums, universities, and archives that might be interested in the journal. But I quickly learned that living on Skye meant becoming part of its community. I couldn't even buy groceries without making friends. "You're Eleanor Fitzpatrick," the woman at the village shop announced when I went to buy milk and bread. "James Morrison's niece." "Welcome, welcome. I'm Moira. My husband Callum fished with your uncle for years." Within minutes, I'd been invited to dinner, offered help with anything I needed, and given a detailed history of everyone in the village. "Now, if you need anything mechanical fixed, that's Duncan at the garage," Moira said. "For baking supplies or advice, that's myself. For local history, you'll want to speak with Fiona MacLeod. She runs the Heritage Centre. And for entertainment, there's Céilí dancing every Friday at the village hall." "Céilí dancing?" "Traditional Scottish dancing. Great fun. You should come." I demurred, but Moira was persistent. "Everyone goes. You'll meet the whole island. And don't worry about not knowing the steps. We'll teach you." That Friday, I found myself in the village hall, surrounded by people of all ages, being twirled around to fiddle music. It was chaotic, joyful, and absolutely exhausting. I hadn't danced in years, and my feet were definitely protesting. "You're doing grand," shouted Callum, Moira's husband, as he spun me past. "Natural talent." I was quite certain I had no natural talent for Céilí dancing, but everyone was so encouraging that I kept going. Between dances, I met Fiona MacLeod, the Heritage Centre director. "Angus MacDonald's journal," she exclaimed when I mentioned my project. "I've heard rumors it existed. Your uncle mentioned it once but said he couldn't show it to anyone until he'd figured out what to do with it. May I see it?" "Of course. Come by the lighthouse anytime." Fiona arrived the next morning with a magnifying glass and white cotton gloves, treating the journal with the reverence it deserved. For 2 hours, we pored over the pages together. "This is extraordinary," she kept saying. "Look at these observations about the puffin colonies. They match nothing in the scientific record from that time. And these drawings." He was truly talented. "Do you think your Heritage Centre would want it?" I asked. She hesitated. "We'd love it, but I'm not sure we have the resources to properly preserve and display it. It needs climate-controlled storage, professional conservation work. This should be in a major archive. Perhaps the National Library of Scotland in Edinburgh. Or even the Natural History Museum in London. So I need to make a trip to Edinburgh. Or invite them here. Show them the lighthouse, let them understand the context. This journal isn't just a historical document. It's tied to this place, this light, this stretch of coast. Any curator worth their salt will want to see that." It was a brilliant idea. Over the next few weeks, I sent carefully worded emails to various institutions, attaching photographs of sample pages. The responses were immediate and enthusiastic. By mid-July, I had arranged for 3 different curators to visit Skye, each from different institutions, all eager to see the journal and make their case for housing it. Chapter 4. The Curators. The first curator to arrive was Dr. Hamish Stewart from the National Library of Scotland. He was a serious man in his 40s who treated the journal like a holy relic. We spent an entire day going through it, page by page, while he made detailed notes. "The historical value is immense," he said. "MacDonald's weather observations could be valuable for climate research. His notes on bird migrations and seal populations provide baseline data for ecological studies. and his personal reflections offer insight into the lives of lighthouse keepers in the Victorian era. So the National Library would want it? Absolutely. We'd conserve it, digitize it, make it available to researchers worldwide. It would be in our maritime collection, alongside other lighthouse keeper journals and logs. He was convincing, but I wanted to hear all the proposals before deciding. The second curator was Dr. Emily Chen from the Natural History Museum in London. She was younger, enthusiastic, and immediately saw the scientific value of MacDonald's work. He was conducting systematic natural history observations decades before such work was common. She explained excitedly. These drawings of marine life, these notes on bird behavior. This is citizen science before the term existed. We'd want to display it alongside our other historical natural history collections, show the connection between amateur naturalists and modern science. Would people be able to see it? Oh yes. We'd create an exhibition around it. Lighthouse naturalists are something similar. Show how keepers contributed to scientific knowledge while performing their duties. That night, I sat in the lighthouse with the journal, thinking about Angus MacDonald. He'd spent 44 years here. Observing, drawing, writing. What would he have wanted for his work? The third curator arrived on a stormy afternoon. Dr. Jack O'Brien from the Scottish Maritime Museum was a weathered man in his 60s, who'd spent 20 years as a lighthouse keeper himself before becoming a curator. I knew your uncle, he said as we climbed the lighthouse stairs together. Good man. He understood what it meant to keep the light. We sat in the lantern room, rain pelting the windows, and I showed him the journal. Jack read in silence for a long time, occasionally nodding or smiling. Finally, he looked up. This belongs here, he said simply. Here? In the lighthouse? Not literally. But in Scotland, in a Scottish maritime context. The National Library would preserve it, but it would be one journal among thousands. The Natural History Museum would showcase it, but it would lose its maritime context. At our museum, we could do both. Preserve it properly, make it accessible. But keep it connected to lighthouse history, to the keeper's life and work. Tell me more. Jack leaned forward. We're planning a new exhibition on lighthouse keepers and their contributions to science, meteorology, and rescue operations. MacDonald's journal would be the centerpiece. We'd reconstruct a lighthouse keeper's desk, display the journal alongside period instruments and tools. School groups would visit. Researchers could access it. And it would stay in Scotland, where it belongs. But your museum is smaller than the others. What about conservation? We have partnerships with the National Archives for conservation work. The journal would be professionally preserved. But it would be seen in context, understood as part of lighthouse history. That matters. Chapter 5. The Decision. I spent the next week wrestling with the decision. Each curator had made a compelling case. The National Library offered prestigious preservation and global research access. The Natural History Museum offered public visibility and scientific context. The Maritime Museum offered cultural connection and contextual meaning. One evening, sitting in the lighthouse watching the sunset, I pulled out another of Uncle James's letters that Malcolm had given me. Eleanor. By now you've probably met with various experts, all wanting the journal. They're all good people with good intentions. But remember this. Angus MacDonald didn't write this journal for scholars or museums. He wrote it because he loved this place and wanted to understand it. Choose the home that will honor that love. James. I thought about MacDonald. Spending decades in this lighthouse. Watching the sea. Recording his observations not for fame or recognition but out of pure curiosity and wonder. I thought about Uncle James, who'd kept the journal safe for all these years, not because it was valuable but because it was important. And I thought about all the people I'd met on Skye. Moira and Callum. Fiona. The folks at the ceilidh dancing. The children who sometimes waved to me from the coastal path. This was a community that understood lighthouses, that lived with the sea, that valued these connections to the past. I called Jack O'Brien. "The journal is yours," I said. "For the Scottish Maritime Museum." His delight was genuine. "You've made the right choice. I promise we'll do it justice. I have one condition." "Name it." "I want the museum to create educational materials that can come back here to Skye. To the Heritage Centre. To local schools. So children growing up here can learn about MacDonald and what he did. His work should inspire the next generation of naturalists and observers. Consider it done." Chapter 6. Summer's End. August on Skye was glorious. With my project complete, I found myself with nothing to do but enjoy my final weeks in the lighthouse. I hiked the coastal paths, learned to identify dozens of seabirds, started a modest nature journal of my own, and became a regular at Friday ceilidhs. Caroline came back to visit for a week, and I showed her around the island like a proper local. "You've changed, Mum," she said one evening as we watched the sunset from the lighthouse. "Have I? You seem younger. More engaged with life." I thought about it. I suppose I feel younger. This summer has reminded me that there's still so much to discover, so much to learn. I'd fallen into thinking my life was winding down. But really, it was just waiting for me to wind it back up. So what happens when summer ends? Are you going back to Devon? I looked out at the sea. The same view Angus MacDonald had watched for 44 years. The same view Uncle James had loved for 40 more. "I'm not sure," I admitted. "The solicitor said Uncle James wanted me to spend one summer here before deciding whether to keep or sell the lighthouse. But he never said I couldn't stay longer." "You're thinking of moving here permanently? Would that be crazy?" Caroline laughed. "Mum, you spent the summer solving a 100-year-old mystery, became the belle of the ceilidh circuit, and discovered a talent for identifying seabirds. I think that ship has already sailed on conventional choices." She had a point. Over the next few weeks, I had several long conversations with myself. Could I really leave Devon, where I'd lived for 50 years? Could I really winter on a Scottish island at my age? Could I really start over at 76? The answer, I discovered, was yes to all three. Chapter 7. New Beginnings. The exhibition, Voices from the Light. The Angus MacDonald Journal. Opened at the Scottish Maritime Museum in October. I attended, along with what seemed like half of Skye, including Fiona, Moira, Callum, and dozens of others who'd heard about the journal over the summer. Jack had done a magnificent job. The journal was displayed in a beautiful case, alongside a reconstruction of a Victorian lighthouse keeper's desk, period equipment, and large reproductions of MacDonald's best drawings. Interactive displays let visitors explore different pages, and there were activities for children about making nature observations. But the best part was a wall of quotations from the journal. MacDonald's eloquent reflections on solitude, nature, and purpose. One in particular caught my eye. People ask if I am lonely in this lighthouse. I tell them I am alone, but not lonely. Loneliness comes from being disconnected from what matters. Here, I am connected to everything. The sea, the sky, the birds, the turning of the seasons. A man who watches the world this closely is never truly alone. Standing there, reading those words, I understood why Uncle James had left me this lighthouse and this summer project. He'd known I was becoming disconnected from what mattered, lost in routines and grief. He'd given me a chance to reconnect. The following week, I officially informed the solicitor that I would be keeping the lighthouse. My cottage in Devon sold quickly. Seaside properties always do. And Caroline helped me organize the move. "Are you sure about this, Mum?" she asked for the 100th time. "Completely sure. For the first time in years, I'm completely sure about something." My first winter in the lighthouse was challenging. Scottish weather is no joke. And there were days when the wind howled so hard I thought the tower might blow over. But there were also days of stark beauty. Snow on the mountains, seals on the rocks below, the northern lights dancing green and purple across the night sky. I joined the Heritage Center as a volunteer, helping Fiona with educational programs. I became a citizen scientist, contributing to bird and marine life surveys. I even started painting terrible, enthusiastic watercolors of seabirds that would make Angus MacDonald wince but which brought me tremendous joy. And every Friday, weather permitting, I went to Cayley dancing. "You've become quite the local," Moira said one evening, bringing me a cup of tea during the break. "I suppose I have," I said, looking around the hall at all the familiar faces. "Though I imagine I'll always be the English woman in the lighthouse to most people." "Nonsense," Callum said. "You're Eleanor. You're one of us." On my first anniversary of arriving on Skye, I climbed the lighthouse stairs. Something I did most days now. And sat at Angus MacDonald's desk with my own journal. It wasn't as scientific or artistic as his, but it was mine. A record of my observations, my thoughts, my new life. I wrote, "A year ago today, I arrived at Dunmore Lighthouse expecting to spend one summer. I've now lived here through all 4 seasons, and I cannot imagine being anywhere else." Uncle James knew exactly what he was doing when he left me this place. He wasn't just giving me a property. He was giving me a challenge, an adventure, and ultimately, a new life. At 77, I am having the time of my life. I have friends, purpose, beauty all around me, and the knowledge that it's never too late to make a dramatic change. Tomorrow, a group of schoolchildren is coming to visit. Fiona and I will tell them about Angus MacDonald and show them how to make nature observations. Who knows, perhaps we'll inspire the next generation of lighthouse naturalists. Angus MacDonald wrote that a person who watches the world closely is never truly alone. I would add, a person who engages with the world fully is never too old for new adventures. I closed the journal and looked out at the sea. The same sea I'd gazed at every day for a year. Yet somehow always new, always changing, always beautiful. In the distance, I could see the ferry crossing to the mainland, carrying visitors to the island. One of them might be starting their own unexpected adventure. I hoped so. The world needs more people willing to say yes to the unexpected. To follow the path that curves away from the familiar. To discover that the best chapters of life can be written at any age. Outside, seabirds wheeled and called. Below, waves crashed rhythmically against the rocks. And in the lighthouse tower, I sat in perfect contentment. Exactly where I was meant to be. My summer had turned into a life. And I wouldn't have it any other way.